Now, this is going to be, to quote George Clooney, a little bit difficult, so try to stay with me. My name's Bo Gallimore. About 15 years ago, I made the mistake of discovering alcohol. Now, as I'm sure if you've ever had one too many, or if you've had a lot too many, everyone's got their own history with it and everyone's got their own understanding and their own horror story. But for me, I knew it was a problem the very first time I did. Because I drank to the point of blackout. And when I came to, I remember vividly my first thought, I want to do it again. And that's how the next 10, possibly 13 years played out, give or take. It destroyed friendships, destroyed relationships, turned me into a pathological liar on a lot of fronts. And there were some people that stuck by me and humored me, almost to my own detriment. It's a term you're probably familiar with called enabling, because ultimately that's what it is. So fast forward, November 13th, 2015. The marriage had fallen apart, the job had fallen apart, completely lost direction. You're coming out of a 3-day bender. I don't know, might have been 4 days. When you're drinking, who's counting? So you put down 4 30-packs, maybe 2 or 3 handles of vodka, and you find yourself sitting alone in a room. And you think to yourself, well, is it time to pass out so that we can wake up in the morning and go at it again? Or do we want something different? Maybe it was God, maybe it was energy, maybe it was sheer dumb luck. But somewhere in that I had a moment of clarity, and I said, if we're going to get up and keep drinking tomorrow, why don't we just end it tonight? And I said, I don't want that. And then when you're faced with that reality, you don't have any other choice. So you have to do something drastic. So I got up, poured everything out, and then I tried to walk a number of miles to the nearest hospital to check myself in. Problem was, 2 miles in, legs gave out, couldn't make it any further. Yet again, fortune smiled, happened to be near a bar where a friend of mine worked. I walked in, much to their horror, and they said, you can't be here, you're too drunk. And I said, that's not why I'm here. My friend looked at me and he goes, is it time? And are you serious? And I said, yeah. He closed down the bar that night, kicked everybody out, drove me to the hospital, checked me in. Now, this is the important part. You get into the hospital, they do the blood tests for the BAC, you declare why you're there. 3 hours later, now keep in mind, this is probably 3 hours from the time I poured everything out, so we're talking a 6-hour window here. By the time the test came back, my BAC was a .297. Now, the numbers on this are constantly changing, but at the time, a .31 would have been fatal. And you go, okay, wow, you were pretty close to comatose. Don't misunderstand. That wasn't the problem. The problem was being that close to comatose, I was still up walking, conscious, and able to have conversations. So they let me sleep it off. Next morning, doctor comes in and he goes, I'm going to give you a choice. I'm going to let you walk out of here this time with one question. What are you going to go do? I said, well, I came here of my own free will last night because I want to get clean. I plan on continuing that. And he goes, I hope so. Because if not, and you come back in here, you show up on my door again, it won't be your choice. So I left the hospital, walked 3-4 miles, whatever it was, back to my apartment. Didn't even shower. I just changed clothes, and I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, in Syracuse, where all of this was happening, they are exceedingly fortunate because at any given time, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, there are at least 5 AA meetings going on somewhere in the Syracuse area. That's wildly unheard of outside of the major cities. I digress. The point being, I started going to AA 3 times a day for 6 months. Now, somewhere in that 6 months, there's a whole other big backstory to this that I'm not really going to go into because now's not the time. But I had lost all my friends, couldn't really find work, literally was penniless. I think I had enough money in my account to last maybe 3 months of rent. Wasn't driving anywhere because I couldn't afford gas because I had to pay rent. Now, of course, this is all coming on the heels of making sure you had enough money to buy alcohol because, that was the important thing. And then you get sober, and all of a sudden the reality of the aftermath of the path of devastation you've left behind you catches up. And I realized I could get sober in Syracuse, but the problem would have been, it would have been nothing more than being a dry drunk. Now, if you're not familiar with this term, there's a profound difference between being sober and not drinking. Not drinking, that's easy. You just put down the bottle, you start looking at your watch and you count the minutes and you say, I haven't drank for 2 weeks. I haven't drank for a month. Therefore, I don't have a problem. And so, you convince yourself over time and you say, oh, okay, I was able to put the bottle down for so many months or so many weeks, so I don't have a problem. And you pick it back up and the cycle starts all over again. Sobriety leads to a very different place. And with sobriety, you start living. And what I mean by that is part of alcoholism is escape. Now, if you want to discuss the chemical aspects of alcoholism, talk to your doctor, read a psychology book, the information's there. But let's talk about the far scarier reality of alcoholism, and that is why people drink. They don't drink to feel good, they drink to escape. And the problem is when you put the bottle down, your problems are still there. So what ends up happening, you have to figure out different ways to deal with your problems. Some people call it coping mechanisms, but the point is the problems are still there and you have to develop new strategies to overcome them that won't leave you feeling as helpless as you did when you went into the bottle. And so this is the battle I faced. And there's a very cutting truth in it. And that is, you have to get sober on your own, but you can't stop drinking without help. And that may seem strange, but you have to have the accountability to break the habit of going to the bottle. You have to have accountability to say, you know what, I did get through the week. But when all that falls away and you start trying to live sober, that's the path you walk alone. And that's the hardest thing. And with that, that's going to lead us into our next session, or our next interview, our next, shall we say, get-together. And we're going to talk about where the path led me. So I hope this kind of gives you an introduction. Oh, one other thing. I don't care if it's sex. I don't care if it's drinking. I don't care if it's drugs. I don't care if it's gambling. This is the linchpin of how you break the cycle. I am not speaking on behalf of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not speaking for them. I'm not speaking in any affiliation with them. But I do say this to you. The reason that group of people worked so well for me is because my very first night or afternoon in AA. Now, if you've never been to an AA meeting, it's kind of like what you see in the movies. But your first time, they ask, anyone ever been to an AA meeting before? You raise your hand, you say, no, I haven't, this is my first time. And something really interesting happens. Literally, whole room stops, and every single person in the room goes around, and they tell you their story of how they ended up there. And after that meeting, that's when I knew I was in the right place. And I'll tell you why. Because I heard every single lie I had ever told myself. And when you hear it coming out of everybody else's mouth, what you thought you were so good at hiding, what you thought you were so good at protecting, you have to face a very nasty reality. And that is, there's not a single person in here I can lie to. Every single person can see straight through me. And when you're sitting in a room full of mirrors, there's nowhere to run. And so with that, I look forward to chatting again. Thank you.